What's going on, guys? This is Jake at BarBend.com. Today we have a very special guest in office. We have Dr. Pat Davidson. He is an exercise physiologist, a strength coach, a traveling lecturer, an author, and much more. Today we're going to be covering 5 fitness trends that need to die. Dr. Davidson's going to take us over the myth and kind of how to think about them in a different state. Without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Davidson.
We're going to be talking about different myths today that need to go away from the world of fitness. And the first one that we're going to get into is the one that says that your knees should never go over your toes while you're squatting or performing other kinds of leg exercises. Is there any evidence at this point in time to suggest that knees going forward is really bad in terms of knee health? There is one piece of evidence that suggests that there is an ever so slight increase in the strain that's imposed upon some of the soft tissues of the ligaments of the knee when we get forward trajectory of the knee. But what we see at the same time is that we significantly reduce shear stress on the lumbar spine and some of the passive tissues that are involved with the lower back. So there's an ever so slight increase in, and I'm talking very, very small increase in some of the forces that we don't want at the knee with knees going excessively over the toes, but there's a dramatic, enormous decrease in the amount of shear force found at the lumbar spine. So I really don't view knees going forward as something that should dramatically impact any kind of a pain or symptomatic problem associated with your knees. And I think, number one, it could be beneficial from the perspective of giving you more ankle dorsiflexion, which is really something that most people lack. And number two, could be a tremendous relief in terms of the stress imposed on your low back while you're performing lower body exercises like squats. Myth number 2 that needs to go away from the fitness world is that spinal flexion is bad. Now, this is a tricky myth to kind of wade our way through. A number of Italian researchers in the 90s and early 2000s took thousands of people that were healthy and reported no back pain whatsoever, threw them into MRIs, and discovered some really interesting things. And one of those was that basically if you're over 35, you almost can guarantee that you have at least one slipped or herniated or protruding disc that's emerging from your lumbar spine. Now you got to remember, these are people with no back pain. And a smaller percentage, but still a pretty good percentage of people that have no back pain have more than one slipped, herniated, or protruding disc. So in many ways, we've been kind of sold this red herring that disc protrusion is always associated with pain. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't actual disc injuries that can be enormously problematic for people, but it seems as though chances are, if you're watching this right now and you're over 35 years old, you probably have a protruding disc with or without back pain. I don't know exactly what is driving your back pain, but there's a high likelihood that it is not a protruding disc. So I think that what we have right now is an early reactive situation amongst professionals about what could be a very small problem and taking this small problem and turning it into a massive problem. So should we flex or should we not flex when we're performing exercise? You know, I think that ultimately, if you look at sports and dynamic human action, there's a great deal of spinal flexion that takes place. And if you think about like what you need to do to be able to function to get through life, you certainly wouldn't want to be a completely rigid and locked up person. You want to be able to flow and move easily and gracefully and fluidly as you go through life and exercise and all of the things that you want to do. Now, there are certainly mechanical things that people can do that are not the most optimal way to move. And when we encounter those things, we want to begin to help people and encourage them towards that which may be more proficient and competent from a movement perspective. But we also want to get across to people psychologically and emotionally that it is okay to move your back and spine through a variety of different directions and movements and speeds and with different kinds of forces. So I think that we need to avoid being completely part of one camp and avoid this tribalism that tends to exist within fitness and appreciate that really there's a multitude of factors that come into back pain. And one of the ones that maybe has led us astray and to become overly reactive is this notion that disc herniations and protrusions are always the dramatic cause of back pain that people are dealing with. It might be something else. Actually, it probably is something else. We don't necessarily know exactly what it is, but when it comes to back pain, you can't always say that the driver of that is excessive amounts of spinal flexion. Myth number 3 that needs to go away is the one that says that if you want toned muscles, the way that you should do it is by lifting light weights for lots and lots and lots of reps. So where did this come from? I have no idea, but I'm going to guess maybe a Pilates class, maybe some kind of a group class, maybe some kind of an 80s aerobics class, maybe Jane Fonda was behind it. I'm not entirely sure, but the thing that we know at this point in time is that any weight that is at least 30% of your 1 rep max or heavier is capable of causing a hypertrophy response. Hypertrophy is just simply that which is associated with growth, and when we're talking about muscles, that means we're talking about getting mo bigger and mo swole. So you can lift light weights, and if you actually work hard and go to or near failure, you can get an equal hypertrophy response from doing 30 plus reps as you can from doing 8 to 12 reps. Now this is stuff that we know at the level of meta-analysis, and the work of Brad Schoenfeld has been incredibly helpful at being able to demonstrate this stuff. And what I find interesting is that is there the potential for there to be sort of like this, whatever toned is, like can people arrive at this through some methodology associated with lighter weights, or is there like a loading rep scheme kind of a deal where if I don't want to put on too much muscle mass, but I also don't want my muscles to like atrophy and fall apart and turn into goo, can I find a procedure that actually accomplishes this? And I would think that there might be 2 possible routes to actually arriving here. One of them is the complete opposite of the nature of this myth, which would be that you would probably want to perform purely absolute strength related training where you're going to go for a low number of sets, a low number of reps per set, but very high weight. You need to accumulate a certain amount of volume to actually be able to drive all of the mechanisms associated with growing muscle mass. You need to do enough reps, enough sets, work hard enough to create enough stimulus to drive muscle growth. If you lift really heavy stuff for only a couple of reps, you won't really be providing the body that which it really needs to create this growth response. The other way to accomplish this is close to the myth. It's just that you would have to really not work very hard. If you use very light weights and you perform reps, but you don't even come close to the point where you're really at the verge of fatigue or failure, and you stop at that point, you will not really be providing any true stimulus to create any change. So while you won't be getting much bigger, you won't really be doing much of anything at all. You'll probably just remain the same forever. So I guess if you want to really waste your time and go absolutely nowhere, lift really light weights for relatively high reps, but make sure you don't exert yourself to the point where you're really trying that hard. Myth number 4 that needs to go away is the idea that if I train like a dancer and I do big excursions of movements, I will develop long, lean dancer muscles. Now, let me present you with another hypothetical situation. I don't know if the camera can really demonstrate to you exactly how short I am, but I'm a 5'6" man. That is not exceedingly tall. One of my goals is that I actually want to be a taller person. And what I've noted is that basketball players are very tall. As a result of noticing this, I've developed my own idea for what I think is a really good training plan going forward, and I'm gonna start playing basketball every day from now until next year at this same time. And I believe that by associating myself with really tall people that play basketball and by doing the same activities that they do, that I should naturally begin to look more like those people. So I'm gonna come back here in a year and we're gonna see if my plan worked any better. But in reality, what I hear a lot of the time, in particular with training women in New York City, is that their goals are to look like other women that they think are demonstrating the physicality that they desire. And they want to take the group class with this woman who has arms that they want to have, or they want to take the dancing, lengthening, toning class with this person whose legs are really long and prominent. And the reality is that you have your own genetic code that was given to you by your parents. And you're probably going to be a similar height and limb length and anthropometric setup as what your parents are. So it's probably a case of where I could play basketball from morning until night and not gain another inch, which is definitely going to be the case. And it's probably also the case that people that are looking to take part in activities that are associated with the body type that they want, they are not going to necessarily drive themselves towards looking more like that person. It's an unfortunate truth, but that myth needs to go. Myth number 5 that needs to go away: you cannot lose belly fat by doing a bunch of sit-ups and ab exercises. It ain't gonna happen. All right, like one of the best studies that was done was one that took a look at cycling and seeing where the most fat was burned and lost from. And what they noticed was that the majority of the fat that was burned did not come from the legs, but instead came from the abdominal region. And that was just a very interesting thing, like how could this possibly be? But the reality is that we need to mobilize potential energy to be able to power you to produce what you need to do to accomplish the physical activity that you're taking place in. And I will always just mobilize from the place that's easiest to put into the circulation. So what you should be doing if you really want to spot reduce is just simply work harder, elevate your heart rate, keep your heart rate elevated for longer amounts of time. Now, the other thing that I think is the really good ride along to talk about within this myth is this idea of like hormonal levels and where those hormones will tend to put fat around your body. Now, at the level of meta-analysis, so you can pretty much say that this is a done deal now, we've seen that the hormonal profile of your body has very little to do with where you tend to distribute fat. The thing that is the major determinant of where you tend to distribute fat is your genetic code. You know, you're going to put fat down where you put fat down because that is what your genome is designed to do to create the shape that you demonstrate to the world. So it just so happens that the fat that you probably dislike the most on your body will be the fat that your genetic code is keeping on your body. All right, so it's very difficult, it's very frustrating. All you can really do about this is accept who you are, number one, and then from there you can follow very good exercise and nutrition guidelines. Try to get on a well-designed, overall, holistic exercise training regimen. Try to get on a well-designed, fully incorporated, all of the macros, omnivorous diet that is created for you by a professional. Work the diet, reduce calories at the appropriate time, eat the appropriate whole foods, train consistently in a progressive manner, demonstrate great technique, always try to get a little bit more out of yourself, and over time, in the appropriate way, you can be a better version of you.
I don't know about you, but I definitely learned something in this video. A big thank you to Dr. Davidson for stopping by the BarBend office in Brooklyn, New York. If you want to read more on these topics, visit barbend.com.